Hello, everyone. Welcome back to DCWF Point of View. And of course, I'm your host, DCWF. And I have with me again my mom, C.
Hi, everyone.
So today we're going to do a video on. Well, actually, we're going to try and do kind of a story about a storyline. Well, either way. Either way. What it's going to be about is we're trying to talk about Marvel's, mostly the Iron Mans and Avengers. And we're going to try and we're going to talk about mostly Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, and we're going to have a little bit about the Captain America Civil War movie, because we want to try and discuss about how the storylines seem to have changed. Now, we'll reference some stuff in the past movies as well, but we're mainly going to be focusing on those three and dealing with the storyline and how it seemingly changed all of a sudden how they wrote the stories.
An extreme change, I think.
Yes, like extreme changes. We'll just go with extreme changes because that is about what it is. Okay, so let's get started. Let's see. Where should we start?
Well, we already know I don't like Captain American Civil War.
Yeah, so we should probably go ahead and start with Captain America Civil War because that is the one prior to Infinity War. Plus, there's like one other movie before Infinity War that they did too. But Infinity War, it is about where the storyline started changing, where they started changing the writing style just a little bit. Now, of course, Stanley was still alive when they did Civil War, so and you can tell the difference. You can tell the difference between when he was alive and when he wasn't anymore on those movies.
Well, I think that if he would have still been alive with Infinity War completely, then maybe they would have fixed Captain America Civil War, because I'm not really up on all the comics and all, but my son is pretty much, and he told me that was supposed to be a kind of fix in there, and they did not fix anything. They just continued downhill from Captain America Civil War as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Well, normally they do fix it. They tend to usually bring them back together, and I mean it may take a little bit of time, but they usually do fix the problem. And this time they did not fix the problem.
It just went with a totally different writing style than it had before, and so it just kind of ignored all of the baggage that they left right there, and then they added new baggage that really didn't work out well either.
Yeah, they left some openings. I mean, you can understand because, oh yes, spoiler alert, you're going to hear us talk about parts of each movies. So in case you haven't watched, well, it's too late. You've already probably heard too much of it now already. So you go back and watch it anyway. You'll turn and get to find out interesting stuff that we're not going to talk about. So either way, so I'd say with the Civil War movie, I guess the biggest surprise was how they did it. They flipped it around. Normally in the stories that I've seen, Captain America was usually on the side of probably getting it signed and everything, and then Iron Man was actually the one who bucked the system.
Yeah.
But in this case, they actually flipped it around with everything that had happened to Tony and all.
Yeah.
Which, that part of the story was fine. I mean, it was a little odd, but it matched with everything that had happened prior to in the movies.
I think the problem was when they dove right into Infinity War, they showed that they had not ever had...
They hadn't even talked to each other in all those years.
They hadn't talked to each other and tried to work together at all in all those years and everything. And I think that made it where it was kind of not very... Yeah. I mean, well, it wasn't cohesive at all, that's for sure, because they just left all that dangling over there, and without them being able to work together at all, that's what led to all the fun stuff that we watched.
Yeah. So Civil War separated them, which, I mean, when you think about how... Which I'll give them this. The idea of them being separated and then Infinity War, that kind of made sense because, honestly, I think that the original Avengers would have had a better chance of beating Thanos even without the added characters like Wanda or Vision, I think they would have had a better chance of beating Thanos, just the original Avengers, if they had all stayed together.
And once they separated,
it did make sense that they needed to be able to lose to Thanos if that was going to be the way the storyline was going to go, so they can make another movie where they did beat Thanos. But I personally think they should have done it a little different.
Yeah, the writing style just totally changed from
where
they were going from here at this spot to the next movie, Infinity War, and then even to Endgame. There was no kind of line that you could follow. It's kind of like, okay, well, you're expecting this and you get this, and of course you always want surprises in movies, but I think there was a little bit too much surprise in those movies and not enough following so you could tie it all together. They didn't tie it all together like they were supposed to,
and the parts that they did tie together didn't well, the parts they tied together didn't make sense anymore. They because they tried to make them make sense, but it seemed like they went way off the beaten path on some of it. Because, well, let's go with Infinity War. Civil War, I don't necessarily like everything they did with it, and there's a lot of arguments about Civil War, but the arguments didn't really start until you get to Infinity War. Infinity War is where those arguments started with the Civil War movie. Because, like we said, they didn't fix the problem between him and Tony, which kind of messed it up, and then it separated the teams.
Because they were both leaders, and so they needed to kind of address that situation at the beginning of Infinity War, I believe. Yeah. And they didn't. They sort of just left it hanging there, and so there was no way for them all to even come close to working together.
Yeah, they didn't even fix any of that until Endgame then.
Yeah.
And by that point, it's kind of like, But yeah, I mean, Infinity War, I mean, I guess we gotta add in Thor Ragnarok. Thor Ragnarok, okay, honestly, awesome movie. I really consider it one of the best Thor movies they made.
Yeah, I like that movie,
and now it went pretty good. I mean, it went well with it, but then like the very first part of Infinity War, this is the part that really started the whole process of throwing off the whole movie, in my opinion, is that we start off first part of the movie. Thanos and the Black Order attack the Asgardians. They attack Thor. They attack the Incredible Hulk. Okay. After watching Thor Ragnarok, this is going to be my biggest complaint about the entire movie, and one of my biggest complaints about the entire Infinity War movie. If you watch Thor Ragnarok, you see their power levels. Thor's power levels was the highest that it's been in all of his movies.
And then the next
in every single movie, he just, and they kept getting stronger. He kept getting stronger and stronger through movies. And then third movie, he was at the highest level he's ever been at. And I mean, he didn't even have Mjolnir anymore, and he still was at the highest power level he'd ever been at without his hammer. And then the first thing you see, you don't even see a fight between him and Thanos. No. He's turned around, he's basically tied up. And then the Hulk comes in, and I mean, yes, Thanos is supposed to be stronger than the Hulk. However, Hulk was already at his stage because of Thor Ragnarok. He was actually at the stage where he should have been getting closer to the World War Hulk, which would have been one of the strongest versions of the Hulk. I mean, one of the most powerful.
Yes.
Because
from what you tell me, anyway.
Yeah, World War Hulk was getting to that strength because it's only a hop and skip to World Breaker Hulk after he gets there, and they didn't do that. And actually, Infinity War, if anything, at the end of Infinity War, it should have probably been World Breaker Hulk that popped up, and not how they went into the end game. I mean, because Banner and Hulk love Natasha.
Yep.
And, well, let's face it, they killed her off halfway through the movie of Endgame. Yeah. So Endgame, he should have become
World Breaker.
World Breaker Hulk. So, yeah, I'm a little off. Sorry, everyone. But I'm getting, because you do mix them together a little bit. But either way, Infinity War. So the first thing is, there you go. Thor's tied up. He didn't even put up a fight. I mean, all the stuff that you see, all this damage, but I mean, he didn't even show that he did any kind of real fight with Thanos, that he basically got taken so easily. I mean, even with all the damage done to the ship.
Just after they had fought.
Yeah, and he destroyed an entire. He almost destroyed the entire building with one of his lightning strikes from the Thor Ragnarok movie. I mean, it was definitely all concentrated in that one area on the balcony where he was fighting his sister.
Yeah.
And he did all that, and he actually turned and slowed her down. And I mean, she had become so much more powerful because she was on Asgard. And see, I mean, but then they also forgot other things, like when his father died, he should have actually inherited the Odin Force, which would have also increased his strength by, tons more. If they would have given something like, Thor had to, it was just that he used up all that energy and he had to recharge, and then Thanos just whooped him, okay, that would have made some sense. But that's not what they did.
Well, they also had, like, Iron Man in there, and you had just watched Iron Man 3, and he had developed all those suits and everything, and then you go to this area where it's like,
Yeah, which, I mean, they invented it as a cool new suit, and each one of the, each one of the Iron Mans, I mean, that is the next one. Iron Man. Each Iron Man, he gets stronger. And now, Iron Man, he's one of the few characters that I can say they didn't really weaken him. Okay. So, well, I'm going to go with Iron Man, he wasn't... They didn't actually... There was about 3 characters in the whole movie of Infinity War that they didn't downgrade after all the movies. And that was Captain America, Iron Man, and I guess I'd say maybe Black Panther? Probably Black Panther.
Maybe, yeah. But they just didn't have the same...
No, they didn't do it the same. I mean, Iron Man and Captain America stood up, in my opinion, they stood the longest. They handled the longest out of all of the characters. Thor, they took him out pretty quick. The Incredible Hulk. And then, I mean, you were expecting something to happen with Banner to make him turn back into Hulk the whole rest of the movie. And he never, ever turned back into the Hulk after he switched over to Banner.
That's just where the writing styles
differentiated
so far from where they started that it was actually a bit confusing. And you're thinking the whole time you're watching Infinity War, you're going... Where did this come from? It sort of just dropped out of the sky.
Well, you could see a little bit of... There were parts of it you could see that were definitely from Stan Lee, where you read about that Stan Lee did have something to do with it, but he died right before they completely finished Infinity War. And as soon as he died, you read that they changed back to what they had. I mean, they had wrote a certain way, and he turned around and convinced them that they needed to go a different route, and they changed it the way he said, and then once he died, they decided, we know what's best, we're going to switch it around. And then it's kind of like, well, some of what you did, it didn't hurt nothing. Some of it didn't.
But some of it was a whole different storyline that couldn't be followed from the previous movies. If you're supposed to be going in a line and watching these movies and you want them to be, okay, you go from this situation to this situation to this situation. We had situation,
Splat.
Yeah.
Because it really was.
Yeah, no more situation that was coming from there. It's a whole different situation from out of a whole nother area.
They didn't fix... First off, they really should have done a little bit of a fix with Captain America and Iron Man. I'm not saying that they should have been fully back together. They should have done something a little different, but there should have been a movie in between before Infinity War. Yeah. There should have been a movie that wasn't Ragnarok, because Ragnarok was about Thor and the Incredible Hulk, because neither one of their characters were in Civil War. Yeah. None of them were in Civil War. Hopefully y'all can still hear me. I might have had my hand covering the speaker just a little bit. either way, yeah, I mean, that's the first thing. Thor Ragnarok, they took care of Thor and Incredible Hulk. That storyline took care of them. It showed where they were, showed what was going on during Civil War. That was fine and dandy. That was great. It even showed a little past the time. So, that worked fine. But then when you went to, but then you go right to Infinity War.
Even if they'd had a short, like a small movie, I mean, like an hour and a half movie maybe, of just showing where they were all going, and then they could have got them together. And I mean, maybe not as close
they
as
should have
they
done
needed.
the Secret Avengers storyline or something like that, because that would have made more sense. It would have. They needed something to bring in, because I mean, the first thing you get there is you see the fight between you see the Thanos beat up the Incredible Hulk. I mean, honestly, that's all you see. And then you see Heimdall die, saving the Incredible Hulk. Then you go to the next thing, which is then you start seeing Captain America, and he's in Wakanda with Black Panther and Bucky, the Winter Soldier, who is no longer the Winter Soldier. I mean, okay, there's an argument right there.
How did they get from here to here?
Yeah, well, Civil War, I mean, you understand how they got to, how Captain America and them ended up where they ended up, because Black Panther turned out and realized, this is the problem. He realized that Bucky really didn't have control. He was programmed. And then he realized that Bucky's not the one who turned around and killed his father either. And he saw that the bad guy, which is Baron Zemo, I think was the name. I think it was the Baron. Because there have a couple of them, and I can't remember if it was directly his name or not. So you see all of them, and they just, he figured, Black Panther saw that he turned around and
but that's where they went off into a whole nother storyline that we were like, okay, where did that come from? Why didn't we do some, and if they'd had like a mid-movie.
Yeah.
But Infinity War, though, was kind of, and then just not cohesive, and then it ended like this, to be continued.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, okay.
Well, first off, I mean, Iron Man, Tony almost died in Infinity War, but then he didn't. He survived. And then we come to Endgame, then you're turning around, they're up in a spaceship. And they're turning him and Nebula. They're dying. They finally get saved by Captain Marvel, which we're not even going to discuss about her. But either way, we're going to turn around and go with the next thing. I mean, then they get saved, and they get to Earth. And then, a little bit later, a few days have went by, and Tony and Iron Man are in an argument with one another. And kind of at a stalemate argument. It's kind of an argument that was already sort of had. Huh?
Tony and Captain America are in an argument with each other, right?
Yeah, Tony and Captain America. Who did I say?
Iron Man. He can't argue with himself.
Well, you never know. No, actually, he could do that. He could have some fun arguing with himself. Okay, so it was Captain America and Tony. They were both arguing with one another. But, I mean, it was a stalemate argument. It was an argument that technically they had kind of already had in the first Avengers movie. So it was a double thing of...
Again, no cohesiveness, and you're just over...
They forgot the past storylines. I mean, when they were writing it, it was like, they were trying to move forward, but then they turned and forgot parts from the past storylines. I mean, the whole point of what happened in Civil War is because of everything that happened to Tony and everything that happened to Captain America between all of his movies. Each one of the people had to make up their decision based upon what had happened in their lifetime already. And Tony's reason is because he believed they needed to be accountable, but that was because he felt like he needed to be accountable. Captain America did believe in that they needed to be held accountable, but he turned around and believed that giving the control of their accountability over to a group of people that actually can be corrupted, because that was what happened in the Captain America Winter Soldier movie. That's where they discovered that Hydra had corrupted S.H.I.E.L.D. Yeah. And I mean, so Captain America, he had a reason to turn around and not trust putting their thing over to him.
Keep going back to that. That's where your breakdown is, though, from Captain America to Infinity War to Endgame. There's where your breakdown is, because from here, the storyline veered off into a left-hand lane that didn't even bring any of that stuff together. So you're kind of getting this stuff
Yeah,
from out of the blue, and you're kind of like, wait a minute.
Yeah, Civil War started changing the storyline, but Civil War was the only one out of the last couple that really had a cohesiveness at all. And then Thor Ragnarok had cohesiveness based upon the stories. Once you get to Infinity War, though, there's no cohesiveness anymore. There's just throwing some stuff in. I mean, they tried to keep it cohesive with some parts, but then they didn't. I mean, Thor's power levels, they basically dropped him back down to his first movie's power level. Captain America and Tony, they actually upped theirs. They increased their power level. When you watch the whole movie, you really see that their power levels actually had increased like the characters should. Their characters increased over time and got stronger, got better. But I mean, it was just two characters. And then Black Panther, they actually should have increased a little bit, and truthfully, they didn't. They didn't increase him, but they didn't decrease him either. They left him at the exact same power level as what he was in the Civil War movie, at least somewhat.
But then there's the snap anyway, and it's like,
yeah.
But my problem is from Infinity War then to Endgame. There's so many years. How did it take them so long?
Yeah, it was like 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, something like that. How did it take them so long to figure out what they needed to do to fix it? And there's a mess up too. That's too much time in between trying to fix a situation that shouldn't have taken that long to fix anyway.
Oh yeah. And then, I mean, not to mention that what happens with that is that when they're fixing the situation, time travel is the very first thing that they decide on. That opens up a whole slew of new storylines. Awesome. Great. There's a ton of Marvel storylines dealing with time travel. They're cool. They're exciting. They're interesting. But, like nowadays, every single time travel storyline that they tend to do, though, they mess up. For some inexplicable reason, they can't seem to get the time travel ones right. They try to keep it with, I guess they try to make it too realistic. What would be as realistic as what we can understand of it. They try to go into more of a realistic scientific way instead of going like it originally was, a fun, interesting storyline, something usable.
Well, that's sometimes what the problem was between those two.
Yeah, and that's what happens with those movies too. I mean, it's not just with the time travel thing; it's also with a lot of the other stuff. They went with they tried to go too realistic with other parts, and
then it caused it to be not as interesting, and and they veer off to the left and to the right, but you don't keep in that straight
and up
line.
and down, and they go around in a few circles too. Which trust me, they went around in a few circles.
Well, we're not even going to talk about the ending of Endgame because that's just
we'll we'll probably get to that too. But I mean, the bad thing is that the storylines just didn't match anymore. I mean, the characters they depowered them in Infinity War so that Thanos wouldn't be able to win so easy. I mean, okay, I'm not going to say too much about any of the What If series that they had, because that opens up a whole new it opens up a new can of worms, in my opinion, when you go back. But I mean, they had the one episode where Ultron, they had the one What If, Ultron won in the second Avengers Age of Ultron movie. He won in this What If scenario. And he then was in Vision's body. And Vision had the Mind Stone. And then, lo and behold, Thanos comes to get the stone, and Ultron just kills him. No muss, no fuss, no fight. Thanos already had the other 4 Infinity Stones, and Ultron goes zip, cuts him right in half. No ifs, no ands, no buts. It's just said and done, and it's just like, wait a minute. If Ultron could do that with the Mind Stone, then why in the world was the Infinity War fight the way it was? Because Thanos he was still fighting to get the stones in Infinity War. I mean, he didn't get the Time Stone because he didn't get the Time Stone right off. He had to fight Iron Man and Doctor Strange. And I mean, and Doctor Strange, they depowered him like significantly in for that movie, in my opinion. I mean, it had been enough years that he should have been upwards of almost Sorcerer Supreme power, which should have turned and basically been like, oh, Thanos. He should have been able to just snap without even the Infinity Stones and almost turn around and do some damage to Thanos. But no, I mean, that was the thing. They didn't do it right. They added so many characters in the Guardians and Doctor Strange and Spider-Man.
What happened is I think that they tried to put too much into it, and when they did that, and they were trying to bring all their storylines together, and instead what they did is they veered them off so much from what they were already saying before that it just messed everything up and split the movies, so that really a lot of what was going on in the movies was like, wait a minute, where did that come from? Why am I even watching this part when we've already dealt with that way back there?
Yeah, to fix some of the stuff in Infinity War, they would have had to add on probably another hour to 2 hours worth of movie.
At least.
At least, I mean, just to turn around, it should have been more like Infinity War Part 1, Infinity War Part 2, and then then Avengers Endgame. And I mean, they would have made it work out if they would have done something like that, but they really didn't. I mean, they turned around and had they just had a weird storyline going. I mean, some of the stuff, don't get me wrong, some of it they did, some of it was to put in, but the way they put it in didn't work. Bringing in Guardians of the Galaxy made sense. Having all the Avengers made sense. Having them split, well, unfortunately, it made sense because they didn't make an in-between movie, which they should have made. And now they're talking about, oh, we want to make this movie or we want to make that movie, and you've already made the movies. It's almost impossible to make a prequel movie now that'll work. Black Widow, it worked. I mean, I didn't like it. I mean, I like the movie. I like the action of the movie. I didn't like the fact of no matter what, you still get to Endgame. You still get to Infinity War. You still get to Endgame.
And you know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and you still know what's going to happen. And then it's just like, wow, doing that really made Black Widow's, they kind of downplayed her in the Infinity War and Endgame movie too, then when they did it that way. And I mean,
for real, because of the way that she had fought in the other Avengers movies, she was really...
Yeah, and then when you watch the Black Widow movie, then you turn like, wow, they really did downgrade her. I mean, that was the biggest issue. I mean, when they brought them all together, I think they should have turned and made Thanos. This is the problem. They kept Thanos at whatever level he was throughout the entire movie until he got the Infinity Stones, which then increased him. There was their problem. They should have brought Thanos up to meet the Avengers. Instead, they brought multiple members of the Avengers down to meet Thanos.
Yeah.
And that didn't work. I mean, come on, let's face it. The end of Infinity War. Thor arrives. He's got the new hammer. He's got the Stormbreaker. It's got the axe. It's got the hammer. He's turned around and got the ability to teleport now like Heimdall used to. And then he can turn around and he's got all of his boosted electricity power. And lo and behold, he's been increased. He's now back at the level plus what he was at the end of Thor Ragnarok. Yeah. Now he's even stronger than what he was at the end of Thor Ragnarok, which he was already like up, extremely strong. Yeah, and then poof, he's turned around. He's whooping up on hundreds of bad guys. I mean, he's just beating the dog out of them. And lo and behold, then he goes after Thanos. I mean, everybody's been fighting Thanos. The only one who's really done any damage to Thanos was Scarlet Witch did some, and Captain America actually surprised Thanos. And he was able to hold his hand, the Infinity Gauntlet hand, and be able to actually hold it, which surprised Thanos. So, I mean, that's where you see that they didn't downplay Captain America's character. They still made him...
And Tony got...
And then Tony actually drew blood from Thanos. So, Captain America and Tony, out of everybody in the whole movie, was like the top tier of where they needed to be. I mean, they had really gotten stronger over their years. But everybody else who had gotten stronger in all their prior movies...
went down.
They downgraded them. And then that caused a problem with the storyline. I mean, The Incredible Hulk should have been stronger, and even if they wanted to go with what they did, after the snap, it should have caused Banner to become... It should have either caused him to become World Breaker Hulk, and if that wasn't going to turn around and make him become World Breaker Hulk, it should have brought him to more like the version of the Incredible Hulk that... Not a genius. It's not the genius Incredible Hulk they should have went with. They should have went with the Incredible Hulk that was able to basically... He was normal intelligence. He always had little bits and pieces of information in there that was from Banner because he is Banner, or he still has Banner in him.
Yeah.
And they should have went with something like that. And then when they made Endgame, honestly, the big final fight, don't get me wrong, the final fight that they had between Thor, Captain America, and, you know, finding out Captain America was worthy to wield Mjolnir, awesome. Really cool. But
you notice I'm not talking about the end of Endgame.
Yes.
Because
well, it's actually staying how they ended it. It should have been, and then, I mean, you know,
I think it's because of the cohesiveness there.
Yeah.
I think they could have ended it in a way where everybody would have came out at least not like it was before, but they could have came out in a better position than they had started with Infinity War. But when they chose to kind of mess it up and because they wanted to throw all the old Avengers, they were trying to bring all the new Avengers in and throw out the old Avengers, and that's where they were trying to put too many storylines in, and they were mixing it all together and not keeping it as a cohesive thing down the line. If they would have just done it where they were keeping it cohesive, but I mean, that's why we're talking about it, because they didn't. And you have to go and watch it yourself and decide whether you think that we're just crazy. Maybe we are, but I don't think so. And because
I don't think so.
Yeah, they veered off so far, and I know that people have talked about it, but it's just really aggravating when you start getting into all these new Avenger things where they want to go back to, like you said, prequels, and you're like, wait a minute, we can't undo. I mean, we didn't even like what you did, but you can't undo it.
The prequels aren't going to fix the problem now. The problems, Marvel's, I like, I mean, I can honestly say, I like the Moon Knight show that they did. I like the Loki series that they did. WandaVision, I actually like the WandaVision series. Okay, so, like I said, you know, I like the Moon Knight series. I like the Loki. WandaVision, well... WandaVision wasn't a bad show. And then another problem was that WandaVision, then you went to the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, which we're not going to go too much further on this part because I'm not going to go into everything on that. But all the storylines, I mean, where the storyline changed was right after Civil War. Thor Ragnarok, Civil War, Stan Lee was still alive.
Yeah.
The storylines... Even though, yes, they were a little frustrating, they were fixable, they were usable.
Yeah.
And they were cohesive with everything that happened in the prior movies. Infinity War. They threw out everything. Yes. I mean, it's just like they kept stuff, but they threw out all the important stuff that Stan Lee had turned and told them. And I mean, I'm sure there's going to be people being like, oh, well, we loved Infinity War and Endgame, and you have your right to your opinion.
Yeah, just like we have our right to ours. I mean, that is what this is about. This is our point of view, but
this is just our opinion. But you know, they ruined the storylines, in my opinion. They and now they've been trying to fix it. They've been trying to fix now for let's see, I think it was 2018 was when Infinity War and Endgame came out. Was 2018, 2019?
Somewhere in there, yeah. It's
somewhere
been
in there.
A little while, and now they want to fix it, but they want to fix it by prequels. And then when you watch the prequels, you just go, oh, man, it could have been so much better. And instead, you're like, oh, man, this stinks so bad because...
Well, first off, when you're trying to fix something once you've messed up, going back doesn't work.
No, because you can't bring them back to life. The characters that they killed off, you can't bring them back to life. And I mean...
Yeah.
And the only way they could do that is if they're going to do a new Endgame, and say, oh,
Yeah.
here's all the stuff that happened after Endgame, but here's what we're going to do with a new Endgame.
Yeah.
We're going to bring everybody, because of the
They have to move forward.
reality things that they have done. And so, but you can't, they need to move forward, but instead they keep going, oh, we'll fix it by going backwards. This is just not working.
And I mean, not in a backwards, like time travel style backwards either. I mean, literally, they're just going backwards with prequel movies and trying to make cohesive what they already did.
That wasn't cohesive.
That wasn't cohesive, so they're trying to fix the cohesion so that way all the new stuff that they're making goes with it. And here's the problem. Yes, we've turned and said the storylines for Infinity War and Endgame were not cohesive storylines. Yes, the movies went together. Those two were cohesive with one another to a point, more so than they were with any of the past movies. But
I guess I have to give you that. It was more than they were with the past movies, but
they threw out their past. They threw out all the past movies.
Yes.
Infinity War and Endgame, you could honestly say, and at the time when they made them, you could have honestly said that those movies were. They could have went with an alternate reality thing. They could have turned and said, "Oh, this is from an alternate universe, an alternate reality, something where they did this." This could have even been. They could have shown it as being one of the things that when Doctor Strange went into his meditative state to see what the futures would be,
this was one of the futures that he saw.
This could have been one of the futures that he saw, and I mean, they could have gotten away with.
That would probably been a lot better, and it made more sense for all the people that disappeared during the snap, like Spider-Man and all of them. They really snapped away people that was almost unimaginable to be snapped away.
Well, Spider-Man shouldn't have.
Yeah.
I mean, and I gotta be honest, Spider-Man in Marvel's, he's one of the big deal characters. I mean, there's so many characters you can just snap off the shows. There really are. There's so many characters you can get rid of that can be replaced by somebody else. But like Iron Man and Captain America, I mean, maybe if it was one of the animated shows or something, maybe you could do that with Iron Man and Captain America, and it may not do as much damage. But Spider-Man's one of those characters too that you just can't do that with in any of the things. He's like one of the mainstay characters you gotta have. Yeah. One of the big things in animation, in the animated movies and stuff, when they do alternate realities, was not actually the Avengers. Yes, they had the Avengers, they would show the Avengers, but one of the biggest deals was always Spider-Man. Most of the time they called it the Spider-Verse over any of the other versions. They would go with the Spider-Verse because it would almost always be something to do with him when they did an alternate reality. But then let's just forgo that. I mean, they tried to make the storylines this way. They messed them up as far as they weren't cohesive, but the cohesion wasn't the only problem. And I mean, if that was the only problem, then yes, the prequel movies would fix it.
Yeah.
If the cohesion was just the problem, then it would work. But see, then they
made all these newer movies, and
they made all these new movies, and they didn't fix them.
Yeah, they went in a totally different way than the characters started, and you're kind of like, why are these movies coming out of now? They're coming out of nowhere. This has nothing to do with their beginnings, nothing to do with how their life should have went.
Yeah, and then like making Wanda because she lost so much. Then making her a bad guy, and forgetting completely. I mean, this is the bad thing. When you watch WandaVision, you can see why Wanda becomes what she becomes in the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, except for one thing. There is one thing that should never have been in the WandaVision if they wanted to make the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness the way they did it. The body of Vision was repurposed, refixed, and the version of Vision that Wanda had created, which would have been was just exactly like what he was, touched the center part of his head, which started his memories, and started turning around and slowly bringing them back. The whole next thing should have always been that Vision went out and he turned around and rediscovered who he was, and that would have prevented Wanda from ever becoming the bad guy in
the multiverse.
In the multiverse of madness, and that's the problem. They threw that part out too when they decided to do the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness movie,
which stemmed from the Infinity War and Endgame, which veered it off into a whole different direction than you started from.
There were so many characters. I mean, that was the problem. I mean, Thanos should have been. They should have brought Thanos up in strength. In Endgame, they strengthened Thanos for the fight in the final part of the movie. They actually did. Infinity War, he wasn't all that strong of a character. He was kind of a character that he was a bad guy. He certainly was seemingly, he wasn't really the Mad Titan. He wasn't like, oh, he should really be the top of the food chain villain for the movie. Honestly, when you watch the movie, it's kind of like they just threw him in. I mean, they've had all these movies that have slowly been bringing his character in and describing him, and they kind of just
threw him in there, and you're kind of like, wait a minute, who's he?
Yeah, it's kind of...
Where did he come from?
You know the character, if you know anything about the comics, you know the character from the cartoons. Didn't. Yeah.
My problem was I didn't, so a lot of the things that happened in an Infinity War were just out of the blue for me because they didn't follow any kind of line that where we're like, okay, if you watch all these, then Mom, if you watch these, you're going to understand. I watched these.
You did all the way up
until Infinity War and Endgame, and now I'm like, I don't understand anymore. What happened?
Oh yeah. Well, the bad thing is I didn't understand it either. And my mom, she started watching the Marvel stuff actually when they did the Iron Man movie. That's when she really started watching Marvels. She didn't do the comics. I mean, when the comics were big was in my grandparents, their years when they were younger, and then like my mom when she was younger, and my dad too, and then me, I'm kind of the third generation into the comics, and it would be the so I get some of the good stuff maybe, but a lot of good comics all were back years ago now, way before I was born, way before I was even thought of to be born, but like my mom didn't care for the comic stuff like that. And I'm sure that probably they heard a little bit about it, and my grandma and granddad probably did too. I don't think they probably did a little bit of comics, but they probably didn't care. Out of everybody in the household, I'm probably the biggest Marvel's DC fan in the whole house, and
definitely.
But I'm not I actually can't say that I've read all the comics or anything. I can't hardly say I've read many of the comics. I've read maybe 10 comics. Probably in my entire life, and that's a spread between DC and Marvels. That's not all of them.
Watched a lot of this,
but almost every single show. I can't say every single one. I tried, but there's some that was very difficult to find. But almost every single show that you can think of from both Marvels and DC Comics, I've watched them. So I had a real general idea of everything that would go on. And then, when I started going on YouTube, I also like watching things from the one guy's channel, Danco. He actually describes the characters from the comics, from all the comics, from multiple comics at a time when he's doing his little battle things. And so, I've learned a little bit more about the comics from there. From about the characters and what they could do in their comics. And so,
So you talked me into watching it.
So I taught my mom into watching Marvels, and she was fine watching and DC. I mean, don't get me wrong, but we're not going to talk about DC in this one, except for just to say the words that DC. But I talked her into watching it. Iron Man, my mom enjoyed Iron Man. I don't think that any of us would have enjoyed it as much if it didn't have Robert Downey Jr. in it.
Yeah.
But we enjoyed Iron Man. We enjoyed the Incredible Hulk movie, and that is the one called The Incredible Hulk, which is actually supposed to be the first movie in the Avengers Marvel's franchise.
Even though they changed people.
Because the very first one, the one that was just called The Incredible Hulk, the Hulk. Yeah, the one that was just called Hulk. It didn't actually go with it. It kind of did, and it kind of didn't. That was kind of like supposed to be a throw-in kind of style movie one, so we're not going to mention that one because it didn't go with it. Not really. Not in the long run of things.
I liked all the movies. I didn't care for Civil War, but
Yeah.
you told me this is what
Yes.
was going to happen. It was
My
supposed to happen.
mom was very unhappy about Civil War, but then, I turned and told her, I've watched all these things. I've turned around and, I've heard all the different stuff on the comic stuff.
They're going to fix it.
They're going to fix it. And then, lo and behold, Thor Ragnarok came on, and hey, that was a good movie. And I was like, well, yeah, it's about Thor and Incredible Hulk. They're not going to really make mention of. And then the next thing I know, Infinity War. Okay, and I'm like, okay, yeah. So they're probably going to use a little bit of that to fix some of the stuff, or maybe they're going to talk. Maybe they're not wanting to do a whole movie fixing it between them. They're just going to show where they got back together. And then I'm watching the movie, and I'm like, okay.
And I'm like, when are they going to fix this?
I mean, this is the thing.
They didn't fix it.
This is the thing, all the other movies, when they came out, I couldn't have told you exactly what was going to happen in the movie, but I could see the storyline. I could see how they got to where they got, and I could see that they were following based a little closer to some of the comics and so on and so forth that I had seen, and even some of the animated. But then when they did Infinity War, every part of what I had ever watched went out the window. Everything that I had ever seen. And sometimes it's great to have a little throw in of a thing that people wouldn't expect. But in this case, it wasn't. They downgraded characters to make this work instead of upgrading Thanos. They should have spent more time bringing Thanos in to make it reasonable how he beat Thor in the first place, just in the first part of the movie. Beating Iron Man, beating Captain America, come on. That's kind of like, it's honestly like it's kind of like some grown person stealing candy from a baby. Yeah, duh. He's gonna beat them. He's like same height as the Incredible Hulk, which means he's got at least, and is about the same muscle mass as, and so he's gonna be strong.
Yeah. And he's been fighting. He's
been fighting for who knows however many years he's been alive. In fact, he's known as the Mad Titan. He destroyed his entire civilization in most storylines. Yeah, that's what made him.
This part's going to happen, but they just totally went off.
To
me, they went off the rails.
Yeah. In that case, it really was like Tony had to fight him on a physical thing. In most of the storylines I ever went with, yeah, Tony had to fight him a little bit physically, but, the biggest fight between Thanos and Tony was his mind. That was where Tony always had the advantage, sort of like how Batman is. Tony's advantage was never the armor. It was always his mind, his ability to turn around and adapt and to create new technologies and stuff to turn and fight the bad guys.
They seem to throw out a lot of that.
But for Infinity War, they kind of threw out his ability to do that and went into the idea of that he just was going to bulldoze through with his armor. And hey, he did damage to Thanos. He actually made Thanos bleed. And you had that really interesting line, all that to make me bleed. They made it such a big thing in the movie. You expected that to make a big deal.
In Endgame.
In Endgame. You thought that was going to have something to do with how Iron Man was going to actually come to beat Thanos. And it never did. It was a cool line, but they put so much, what do you call it, into it? So much focus on that little part. It made it stick in your mind. Even now, we haven't watched that movie in a couple years, and it still turned around. That little section sticks in your mind. That is how much effort and everything they put into that. And emphasis they put into that little section right there was when Iron Man caused Thanos to bleed, and Thanos turned around and says, all that for a little bit of blood.
And then you're thinking that, in Endgame they're going to use this, and this is going to get the story back online. And
and you think, this is what turn around and makes the whole movie worth it. It's going to turn around and it's going to make everything worth it.
It's going to fix everything.
It's going to cause them to be able to have a way to defeat him. Because I knew that I figured that he was going to win. Granted, I didn't figure that they were going to let Thor turn around and hit him with the axe, with his hammer. That right there was just ridiculous, in my opinion. All that fighting, the first scene in the movie, he's tied up. Then at the end, when he's fighting, he turns around and uses his new hammer. He shoves it through the chest of Thanos, who then still has enough energy to snap. Not only does he have enough energy to snap, it's not like he died either. He turned around, he actually lived. He lived for all those years. He destroyed the Infinity Stones. they finally turn around and, I mean, you know, when they found him, he had destroyed the Infinity Stones. And he was still alive, though. I mean, if anything, it should have really been the way they ended it. Sure, Thanos should have turned and disappeared, but in all honesty, the next time they should have found him, he should have turned and been just a dead husk because of how Thor hit him. Yeah. And instead, he didn't. And then Thor turned, of course, did kill him. And then it was for... And then, you know, and then Thor went off and became whatever Thor became. I mean, that was a complete mess of storyline as well.
They threw that way out of there. I don't know.
And then they went from there to the last Thor movie, which I did watch, which we actually all did watch, Love and Thunder. It was a movie. I mean, they went way overacting on that movie. Maybe if they downplayed some of that part, it would have been better. Maybe, but...
That was the only good thing you can say about that movie was the music.
Yes, they had good music choices, sort of like Thor Ragnarok and then the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. They had great music choices.
But that's all the good you can call in that movie.
That movie wasn't really, it was.
That's where this non-cohesiveness and Infinity and Endgame.
Yeah, they continued that. They continued the no cohesives. So everything went from being cohesive to not cohesive. Now they've been trying to fix the cohesiveness, and that's failed. And then, you know, okay, they need to move forward. Let's just be honest. We're going to turn and tell them this. The writers and whoever it is that's in control of it, look, you want to fix the problem, you need to move forward. But you can't, but the way you've been moving forward isn't working. It's not going to work because, and I'm saying this, it's not going to work because you've already tried. Now, you've literally been trying for years now.
It's not go forward from where you're at and start over. And I mean, if you want the new Avengers...
Or better yet, at this point, maybe you should really just start over.
I still think they should use I'm going to sneak this in.
Uh-huh.
I think they should still use the Madam Web movie to start over.
Yes. Personally, I think they should. I think Madam Web should be the beginning of a new series of movies, because I think that what's wrong is that once they did Infinity War and Endgame, I think that they could have fixed it. I do. I think that once they did, even after Endgame, I think that they had a chance to fix it when they did the Spider-Man movie and then a little bit after that. But I think that once they passed about 2 more movies after that, or even the shows, they've messed it up. You can't fix it now. It's not something you can fix because you needed Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. You did. I mean, it's not like he had to remain playing the part always, as far as he didn't have to sit there and constantly always fight until he was in his 90s. He didn't have to do that. No, but he needed to be a part of the characters.
Yeah, he needed to be in there, him and Chris Evans as Captain America.
They needed to be the ones, maybe they should have tried and just had them, since they were getting older, what they should have done was they should have had them training the newer Avengers that were going to be coming in. And honestly, Spider-Man, the way they set up Infinity War and Endgame, Spider-Man was supposed to, I think, take the place of Tony. And that would have been great. It would have worked just fine. If he would have been the new leader of the Avengers, well, him on as far as like the technological and the one part, and then he just needed another character to go off of him that was like Captain America.
It would have worked.
That would have worked great. But I mean, they needed something that they didn't have. And I mean, they needed to add somebody in there to do it, because Black Panther probably would have been fine. But then, I mean, honestly, the man who played Black Panther, he died.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's sad. I mean, he did a good job.
He did.
But I felt like they gave him a sour deal on the character when they did the first Black Panther movie, because I felt like that was even downgraded from the the Endgame movie and everything. I felt like they really downgraded his character even there.
I think they did a lot of it. I think, though, like I said, I'm shamelessly saying this, but I really think that since, to me, they've spoiled their chances to go forward, maybe they should take the Madam Web movie and start from there, and then maybe we can just...
Or even what they're talking about with this new Doom movie where Robert Downey Jr. is playing Doom and all. I hope that he'll be a good guy. I hope they're going to go with a version of Doom where he's the hero.
Yeah.
Where he becomes a hero at least. Personally, I think that they should turn around and they should take one of these and they should start over. They should turn around and start it as a complete new series of movies. I mean, the movies were great. The Marvel's movies were awesome. and personally until they hit those areas. And then they had some good shows, Moon Knight and all them. They were pretty decent shows, and
I really liked Moon Knight. It was one of my favorite. I haven't watched Loki, of course, but I really liked the Moon Knights, and so I thought those were really cool.
But they were great shows, and they kept trying to use them to fix. And this was the weird thing. I kept watching how they were trying to use them to fix, and the storylines were awesome. They were even reminiscent of Stan Lee. The people who were writing those ones, because I don't think it was the Russo brothers who were writing those ones.
I don't think so.
And they were all reminiscent. Most of the shows were reminiscent of Stan Lee. Whoever it was writing, who had studied it well enough that they were mimicking. Maybe not perfect, because it would be almost impossible to do it perfectly.
Yeah.
But they were mimicking it well enough that it was worthwhile watching the stories.
But our point of view is they need to start with one of these new movies, work from there, go forward, because they lost their cohesiveness, and no amount of prequels or
and everything that they're using to try to fix it, they keep throwing it out. I mean, any of the stuff that could work to fix it, they don't like it. I hate to say it, the Deadpool Wolverine movie, honestly, they could use that. It could have fixed some of the problems.
It could have.
If they turn around and stopped making their other stuff right before the movie.
We're not going to discuss that movie.
Yeah.
The martial arts in that movie are awesome.
Yes. Well, I'll be honest. We watched the movie. Yes, we watched it with volume. Love the martial arts.
The fighting.
The martial arts. And there was a few lines in there that was definitely funny. And quite hilarious. Turn around there. His pokes at Fox and all of them. That actually is funny because, really the writers and stuff of those companies and the companies themselves definitely did mess up a lot of the stuff for them.
I'm not watching that movie with volume ever again.
Yes, it was a little too much language.
Spoiler.
Yes, it was way too much language. I mean, we watched something on YouTube where they turned around and had Chef Ramsay on it. I can't remember what the name of the thing was. But either way, he was on there, and they said that he said this one bad word way more times than was in the Deadpool Wolverine movie. Yeah. Maybe. He might have said that one specific bad word more times than what they said in the Deadpool Wolverine movie. But let me tell you, Deadpool Wolverine would turn around and whooped up on him in that case.
Yeah, they made up for it in other words.
Oh yes, other words, other things. I know that he's known as the Merc with the Mouth.
So they could even take that one.
Yes,
but I still think their better starting point would be Madam Web.
I think so. Well, I think Madam Web would be a better starting point.
Because it would take out the Spider-Verse and then allow Spider-Man to become the head of it like they should and everything. But
Madam Web was outside. See, that's the reason why they should pick it and why we think they should pick it. Madam Web, and especially since Disney apparently hated it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no other way of explaining it. It's outside of all of this. It's a whole new start. They didn't mention one of any of these other things. And from here, and see, this is the fun thing about these movies. They don't have to turn around and change actors. No. They could bring back Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. They could bring back Chris Evans as Captain America. Mm-hmm. They can bring back the guy who plays Daredevil. They can bring back the one who played Punisher. Yeah. They can bring back any of these people to play the parts. The Madam Web movie is just a good place to turn around and start over because they're in an alternate reality from where we're at. They could bring back all of the characters. They could bring back the guy who plays Venom. They could bring back all these characters into a whole new slew of movies that don't have anything to do with the prior storylines, and could still make something good out of it just from using Madam Web as a starting point movie. Yeah. And that would be a good idea. I mean, don't get me wrong. I want to see Kraven the Hunter, which eventually we will get to watch it. Yeah. And there was a couple movies we wanted to see, but they've went so far. They've been trying to get back to Avengers. Let me tell you something. The Russo brothers made all this big deal years ago. And I don't remember exactly what they said, but I remember enough to know that they said that they had the next wave of movies, all these waves of movies preset. They were going to have probably about 2 or 3 years worth of movies and shows that were not going to be Avengers movies. They were going to be ones to fix to make the story cohesive, bring in new characters. And then they were going to look at making a new Avengers movie. Okay. It literally is on the day when we're filming this. This is January 1st, 2025 when we're filming this video. Okay. It has been at least 5 to 6 years since the last Avengers movie, which was Avengers Endgame. It's been at least that long. And
they haven't fixed anything.
They haven't fixed anything with the shows and movies they've made. Multiple characters, this is the thing. Multiple of the characters they've brought in, they've gotten rid of. They've actually gotten rid of them. And I mean, whether it be that they got rid of the character or the person playing the character, they've gotten rid of them. And I'm not talking about people who turned and died, like the one who played Black Panther. I'm not talking about him, because the one they have playing Shuri, she did a good job taking over the part. And no complaint there. They did a good job with that Black Panther movie, and it was very, in my opinion, very respectful to the man who played the part originally. Yes. A very respectful movie. I actually did enjoy the action of it. I thought it was a really good storyline. I mean, sad, yes, but I thought that they did it justice. Which I felt like the first Black Panther movie, I felt like the guy who played the part, great, but I felt like they didn't give him the right storyline. I felt like the storyline they gave him was not giving him justice, wasn't giving his character justice, or any of their characters justice. But
from the comics and all of that.
From the comics and what they had already made for Civil War and everything else.
He was really a big character in the Civil War, and he had done so much in there. You were kind of expecting
You're expecting him to be upgraded, making him stronger, more interesting. You're expecting a real cool fighting thing. So, but I mean, they just downgraded it. But the fact is, they should turn around, and personally we think that they really should just stop the things, because it's been at least 6 years since the last Avengers movie. They've bypassed the amount of time. And they needed a new Avengers movie already by now. Yeah. And they haven't fixed anything with what they've done. Everything they've done, they do it to try to complete a storyline, but when they complete the storyline, it causes more errors and more problems for the next storyline, and they've had to throw out so many things just based upon how people's reacted to their stuff. And these were all fixable things if they had just followed a pattern of how Marvel's works. A lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, the characters will die. But if they die during fights or something like that, like how they killed Iron Man, they bring back the characters in the future. They bring them back. They bring them back by time travel. They bring them back by hundreds of different things, and they had hundreds of different ways to do this. And they literally, every single time that they come up with it where they had it set up where you could, they threw it out. Yeah. For some reason or another.
So they need to take one of these new ones and start from that
So they need to start.
So there'll be a cohesive line again. And then once they get it started, they need to stay on that line.
Yes, but I hate to turn and tell them, they need to start. I want to see the Doctor Doom, because I want to see Robert Downey Jr. play Doctor Doom. And I want to see Chris Evans play in that one as well, as Captain Hydra or Captain America, whatever one he's playing. Yeah. I want to see them. I want them to bring them back. And I'd love to see them become good guys in these movies. Yeah. That's fine and dandy. I think that this could still be done, but I think that they should really make it connected up with the Madam Webs, so that way they're no longer connected to the original Iron Man's and Marvel movies, because those were awesome movies, but the further they go along, I feel like the more that they ruin what they already had. Yeah. They had awesome stuff, and now they're just keeping going down. They're going downhill trying to fix something that they messed up by doing it the way they did it. So, granted, it is our opinion.
Yes.
I hope you enjoyed the videos, and please go and watch the movie yourselves. I mean, there's tons of stuff that we did not cover. There's tons of stuff we didn't go over as far as individual movies, because, well, later on we might do those. We might go over each individual movie, and when we do that, we're not going to turn and be talking about the overall storyline.
No.
The video was completely about just that, the storyline. When did it change? Why did it mess up? I mean, where did they really do the mess ups? And I mean, the truth is that yes, the cohesiveness was a problem. That messed up some of it. But it wasn't just the cohesiveness that was the problem. It really was that they changed characters right in the middle of while the shows were going. they try and change them from how they were in prior movies, downgrading them or making them weird, doing weird stuff to them while
and
they were
trying to branch out too far into
trying to branch and bring new characters in that they never even brought a lot of characters in. They tried and they failed because they messed it up, and people hate. I mean, this is the problem. People kind of hated the movies. I know that they got some good records on some of them, as far as they were up on one of the ratings or something. But people didn't like the movies because I hate to turn around and explain. I hate to tell it, but anybody who's watching this, it's the common people who basically give them their money, because I mean we're the ones who watch the movies, rent the movies, and no problems with the movies as far as one part goes. But I don't, these storylines should have definitely had some cohesiveness and all, and shouldn't have been dependent upon. Because I know they're going to say, oh well, they took it from a comic. Well, great, but it should have been matched up in the storyline where anybody could watch the movie, and it should have been able to watch where anybody could watch the movies and actually know what was going on without having to go back into a comic book somewhere back from 10 years ago or 15 or 20 years ago. And that's the big problem they started having. They wanted to go into comics that some people don't read.
Definitely.
So
like I don't read them.
Yeah.
So if I would have just watched Infinity War and Endgame, I would have been totally lost.
Yeah.
I ended up totally lost anyways, even though I'd watched all the other stuff. So that's our point of view.
Yeah, that's the point of view. Yeah, well, and then you would have really hated if that would have been the first one you started with. I mean, that's a good way. That's a good way to destroy the entire thing. People, if anybody just watches that one, don't watch any of the past ones, they'll probably go to hate the show, hate the movies. And I mean, they had some good ones prior to that.
Yeah.
So
I wouldn't have watched anything else if that's where I would have started.
Yeah. And honestly, I probably wouldn't have either. So, either way, I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Go back, watch those movies for your own self. Yes, there were spoilers. Sorry if you didn't like that. All I can say is you should have paused next to the video a few minutes ago when we started. Either way, I hope y'all had a great day, and
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, and well, we'll catch you again on another video, because we do plan on doing one on DC. I don't know if that'll be the next video we release, but we're going to do one dealing with DC comic storylines, dealing with the CW side with the Arrowverse. At least that is our plan.
Yes,
unless something changes.
Yeah.
So, unless
we have a compelling need to talk about something else first.
Yes, unless there's something else more important to pop up. And so, either way, hope y'all have a great day. Remember, this is our opinion, and you have your opinion, and, well, hey, you might turn and find it interesting to meet somebody who has similar opinion to you. And then, if we've got different opinions, hey, that's just normal.
Yeah, that's right. The
thing that's not normal is when you meet people who have a similar opinion to you. That's the thing that's not normal.
Yep, there you go.
So, I hope you have a great day. I hope you enjoy this video if you made it this far. Feel free to like, subscribe, leave comments. Yes, if you want to complain or say anything about what we said, yeah, you can go ahead and do that too. Just try to keep it PG, because I don't turn around and make this, this is for all ages. I don't see this as just being for kids. Okay, so try to make it PG just in case some younger kids, because Marvels and, I know a lot of grown-ups watch it nowadays, but remember that a lot of that was designed for kids, for families, not just... So some of the stuff that they do now, they probably should cut down on some of it in the movies to account for, us for families, not just for one age group. Yeah. So have a great day. Happy New Year. May the Lord help you to have a great new year.
That's right.
And
God bless you.
God bless you. And, well, like I said, talk to you a little later. Come back and join us again. So long.